Jaden sat quietly in his classroom, his notebook open and pencil ready, trying not to show how nervous he was. His heart beat a little faster than usual, because today was not an ordinary day. Today was, what does your parent do? Day in Ms. Parker's 6th grade class. Each student was asked to stand in front of the class and share what their mom or dad did for a living. Some kids were excited, some shy, but Jaden's hands were already sweating. He looked around at his classmates. Mia had just finished telling the class how her mom was a nurse who worked night shifts at the hospital. Everyone clapped, and Ms. Parker nodded approvingly. Before that, Ryan said his dad worked in construction, and Ava mentioned her mom ran a small bakery. There was laughter, smiles, even a few cool S and wow S here and there. The classroom buzzed with energy. But Jaden just sat there, wondering how they would react to what he had to say. Jaden wasn't like most kids in his school. He was one of only 3 black students in the class. Though most of the kids were friendly, he could still feel the difference sometimes. It was in the way they looked at his shoes or asked him strange questions about his hair. It wasn't cruel, but it wasn't quite kind either. It made him feel like he always had to prove something that he didn't quite belong. Miss Parker finally looked up from her list. "Jaden, your turn," she said with a polite smile. Jaden stood up slowly. His knees felt weak, and his voice was almost a whisper when he started. "My dad, he works at the Pentagon." There was a brief silence in the room. For a second, nobody said anything. Few students turned to each other and raised their eyebrows. One boy near the back even let out a small snort. Then, to Jaden's surprise, Miss Parker laughed an actual short laugh. Not mean, but dismissive, like she thought he was joking. "The Pentagon?" she said, tilting her head. "That's quite a claim. So what is your dad the president's bodyguard?" A few kids laughed, louder this time. Jaden's face turned red. He shook his head. "No, ma'am. He works in cybersecurity. He helps protect the country from digital threats." And Miss Parker cut him off, still smiling. "Well, that's a very impressive imagination, Jaden. Remember, today's about real jobs." Jaden sat back down slowly, his head hanging low, his stomach twisted in knots. He wanted to speak up, to explain more, to defend what he had said. But he could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on him. Nobody believed him. Even his teacher thought he was making it up. The rest of the class went on, but Jaden didn't hear much of it. He kept replaying what had just happened. Why would she laugh like that? Why would she think he was lying? He hadn't said anything. Untrue. His dad did work at the Pentagon. Jaden had seen the badges, the ID cards, even visited the building once during a family day event. But now, because of that one moment, it felt like his truth had been crushed. At lunch, things got worse. A group of kids from his class walked past his table. "Hey, Jaden," one boy said, grinning. "Tell us more about your dad being a secret agent." "Maybe he's Batman too," another added, and the group burst into laughter. Jaden looked down at his sandwich. He wasn't hungry anymore. He just wanted to go home. When he got off the bus that afternoon, he walked slowly up the steps of his apartment building. His mom was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of rice when he walked in. "Hi, baby," she said cheerfully. "How was school?" Jaden didn't answer at first. He dropped his bag and sat at the table. "Mom," he said, quietly, "do you think people don't believe me because I'm black?" His mom froze, the spoon in her hand hovering midair. She turned and looked at him, concern filling her eyes. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" Jaden explained everything: the classroom, the laughter, the way Ms. Parker had made fun of him in front of everyone. His mom listened carefully, not saying anything until he finished. Then she walked over, knelt beside his chair, took his hands in hers. "Jaden," she said softly, "sometimes people let their small minds speak louder than the truth. What your teacher did was wrong. Doesn't matter what she believes. You know your father. You know his work. I know how proud he is of you." Jaden nodded, but the sting was still there. That evening, when his father came home in uniform, tall, proud, with the air of someone who held deep responsibility, Jaden stayed quiet. But his mother told him what had happened. Major Darius Williams listened carefully, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides. "They made fun of you?" he asked Jaden, calm but serious. Jaden nodded. His father knelt down, just like his mother had, and looked into his eyes. "Son," he said firmly, "never let anyone shame you for speaking the truth, ever. I've faced people who didn't believe. I belonged in rooms where decisions are made. I've faced them in boardrooms, in security checks, and sometimes even in uniform. But I never backed down, because I do belong, and so do you." Jaden felt a small smile creep onto his face. His dad always knew what to say. Then his father added, "Maybe it's time your class learned the truth from me." Jaden blinked. "You mean come to school?" His dad nodded. "Why not? Isn't career day coming up?" Jaden's eyes lit up, but there was still a part of him that was nervous. What if they still don't believe? His father smiled. "And I'll walk in wearing the truth on my chest." That night, Jaden went to bed feeling a little braver than before. He stared up at the ceiling, thinking about how fast things had changed in one day. He was still hurt, still embarrassed. But now there was a small flicker of hope, chance to show everyone who his dad really was. Not to brag, not to prove a point, but to stand tall in the truth. And deep down, Jaden knew the story wasn't over yet. Jaden didn't sleep very well that night. Kept thinking about what happened in class, the laughter, the jokes, the way Ms. Parker looked at him like he was lying. Even when he closed his eyes, he could still hear the voices of his classmates mocking him. He turned from one side to the other under his blanket, trying to push the thoughts away, but they stayed. It wasn't just about one moment. It was about feeling small, feeling invisible, even when you're telling the truth. The next morning, Jaden woke up with a heavy heart. His mom made him breakfast like always, toast and orange juice, but he didn't eat much. His dad had already gone to work, and Jaden kept glancing at the clock, wishing he didn't have to go to school at all. When he reached his classroom, the usual energy felt different. The moment he walked in, a few kids looked at him and then quickly turned away, whispering to each other. He knew they were still talking about what happened yesterday. As he took his seat, one boy 2 rows behind him said, just loud enough for others to hear, "Careful, guys. Jaden might call the FBI on us." Another student added, "Maybe his dad's in space now. Like a superhero. Or a ninja." Laughter followed. Not cruel, but sharp enough to sting. Jaden didn't say anything, just opened his notebook and stared at the page, his pencil in his hand but not moving. He didn't want to cry. He wouldn't cry. But he felt something heavy sitting in his chest. Ms. Parker entered the class with her usual cheerful voice, asking students to settle down. She began the lesson like normal, without mentioning what had happened the day before. But her eyes met Jaden's once, and she quickly looked away. There was no apology, no recognition of her mistakenly silence. The rest of the day was a blur. Jaden couldn't focus on math or science. At recess, he sat alone. Some of the kids who used to play soccer with him now stayed away, not mean, but distant. It was like everyone had placed him in a box labeled liar, and they didn't know how to open it. Even his best friend Elijah was acting weird. Jaden found him by the swings and asked, "Why didn't you sit with me at lunch?" Elijah looked uncomfortable. "I don't know, man. Everyone was talking about what you said, about your dad. I mean, the Pentagon, that's kind of big." Felt his face flush, but it's true. "I'm not saying it's not," Elijah said quickly. "It's just, people think you made it up." And Miss Parker laughed. "So, I don't know." Jaden nodded slowly and walked away. It hurt more than the jokes. At home, he didn't say much. His mom noticed the quiet look on his face and pulled him close. "It was hard again today," she asked softly. He nodded against her shoulder. "Even my friend doesn't believe me." She brushed his hair gently with her fingers. Sometimes people aren't ready for the truth when it doesn't come from someone they expect. But that doesn't make your truth any smaller. Jaden didn't know what to say to that. He just wanted things to go back to normal, but it felt like they never would. The next few days were more of the same. Students continued to whisper behind his back. One morning, someone had drawn a cartoon on the whiteboard before class started, a stick figure with dark skin wearing a cape, with the words FBI Jaden above it. Some students laughed. Ms. Parker erased it quickly when she came in, but said nothing about it. She didn't scold anyone or defend Jaden. just pretended it didn't happen. That silence made everything worse. Jaden started dreading school. He would pretend to be sick sometimes, just to stay home. He didn't want to face the eyes, the whispers, the laughter. Even though he hadn't done anything wrong, he felt like he was being punished. One night, his father noticed how quiet Jaden had become. He sat beside him and said, "I've seen that look before." Jaden looked up. "What look?" "The one that says, 'I feel like I'm losing even though I didn't do anything wrong.'" Jaden nodded slowly. "Everyone thinks I lied, even Ms. Parker." His dad took a deep breath. "You know, the first time I walked into a high-security meeting room, someone looked at me like I didn't belong. They didn't say it out loud, but their eyes told me. It took a long time for people to respect me. Not because I wasn't good at my job, but because of how I looked. Where I came from?" Jaden looked surprised. "But you work at the Pentagon." "And I still do," his father said with a smile. "And now they know who I am." But it started with me refusing to let their doubts become my truth. Jaden was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "What if they never believe me?" "Then we show them. Not with words, with presence." That night, Jaden and his father filled out the school's career day form. They checked the box that said parent speaker and wrote in clear letters, "Cybersecurity Officer, U.S. Department of Defense." Jaden still felt nervous. A part of him was scared that even if his dad came, people would still find a way to mock him. But a small flame had started to grow inside him again, a little light of hope. At school, career day was coming up fast. Students were buzzing about it. "My dad's bringing his firefighter gear," someone said. "My mom's going to give us cupcakes after she talks about baking," said another. Jaden kept quiet. One afternoon, Miss Parker reminded everyone, "Don't forget next Friday is career day. Your parents are welcome to come and share about their jobs. We'll have a lot of fun guests." Then she looked directly at Jaden, her voice slightly hesitant. "Jaden, is your parent coming too?" Jaden nodded. "My dad's coming." She paused for a second. "That's good," she said quickly, then moved on. Jaden didn't know if she was worried, nervous, or still doubting him. But something in her eyes had changed. Maybe she was starting to think, what if he was telling the truth? In the days before career day, the teasing didn't stop completely, but it slowed down. Maybe the others were getting bored of the joke. Maybe some of them were getting curious. A few kids even came up to him and asked, "Is your dad really coming?" Jaden would nod without smiling, without showing off. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want to make anyone feel bad, just wanted one thing: for the truth to be seen, finally, without doubt. The night before career day, Jaden laid out his clothes carefully. He picked his cleanest jeans and his favorite red shirt. His mom ironed them for him. His dad polished his shoes and laid out his own military uniform on the hanger. Dark blue with medals pinned neatly on the chest and his name embroidered above the pocket. When Jaden saw his dad in full uniform that morning, his heart beat faster, but not out of fear this time. It was pride, pure pride. As they walked to school together, Jaden held his father's hand tightly. His dad didn't say much, just gave him a quiet nod of reassurance before they walked into the building. Didn't know exactly what would happen next, but he knew this was the moment everything could change. Not just for him, but for everyone who had laughed, everyone who had doubted, and even for the teacher who once smiled like he didn't matter, because soon the truth would walk into that classroom wearing polished shoes, a sharp uniform, and the strength of dignity. The morning of career day was unlike any other day at school. Students came in early, chatting excitedly, some holding their parents' hands, others waving at classmates. Everyone wore something a little extra neat: shirts, polished shoes, big smiles. The school hallways were filled with posters that said "Career Day 9 a.m., 11 a.m., learn what our parents do," and colorful balloons tied to chairs. Jaden sat in his classroom, his heart pounding in his chest. He had gotten up extra early, brushed his teeth twice, made sure his shirt didn't have a single wrinkle, and even put on a little cologne his dad let him use. He looked sharp, but inside he was nervous. His dad was coming. Not just coming, but walking into this very classroom to speak. This was the moment Jaden had dreamed about and feared at the same time. As he sat in his chair, he watched other students walking in with their parents. Mia's mom carried a stethoscope around her neck. Ryan's dad wore a bright orange vest with his construction company's logo. A woman walked in holding cupcakes and a tray of cookies. Ava's mom from the bakery. The room smelled sweet and happy, but Jaden noticed something else to whispers. Students looking at him, nudging each other. Some were curious. Some still had that smirk on their faces, like they were waiting to prove he was lying. A few students from other classes even peeked into the room, looking for Jaden's imaginary superhero dad. Miss Parker stood at the front of the class, smiling and greeting parents. She acted calm, but when she looked at Jaden, her smile seemed tighter, more forced. Maybe she remembered how she had laughed at him that day. Maybe she was nervous too. Began the day by welcoming everyone. Thank you, parents, for being here. Today is special. We get to show our students that hard work, passion, and dreams come in many forms. Then, one by one, parents started talking about their jobs. Mia's mom spoke first. I'm a nurse in the emergency room. I help people who are hurt or sick. Sometimes it's hard, but I love what I do. Class clapped. Ryan's dad came. Up next, I build things. Houses, stores, roads. It's not always easy, but at the end of the day, I can look at something and say, I made that. More claps. Some kids even said, that's cool. Ava's mom brought everyone cookies and talked about baking since she was a teenager. Now I own my own shop, she said. If you ever come by Sweet Street Bakery, the first cookie is on me. The room laughed and cheered. Everyone was smiling happy. Then Ms. Parker looked at her list and cleared her throat. Next, we have Jaden's father, Major Darius Williams. The classroom fell quiet. Jaden looked at the door. It opened slowly, and there he was, Major. Darius Williams walked into the room wearing his deep blue military uniform. His shoes were polished. His shoulders were straight. His name badge and medals shone under the fluorescent lights. He walked with a strong, quiet confidence. Not proud in a showy wage, just calm, solid, certain. Gasps filled the room. You could hear a pin drop. Some students stared with wide eyes. A few parents sat straighter in their chairs. Miss Parker blinked several times, her mouth slightly open, and stepped aside quickly to give him space. Jaden's heart swelled. He didn't smile big or make a scene. He just watched his dad move to the front of the class and stand tall. Good morning, Major Williams said, his voice deep but gentle. My name is Darius Williams, and I work at the Pentagon. I'm a cybersecurity officer with the United States Department of Defense. Whispers fluttered through the room. One boy near the back mouthed, "Oh my God," Major Williams continued. What does that mean? It means I help protect this country from threats, not just physical ones, but digital ones. Hackers, cyber attacks, stolen data. These things are just as dangerous as any weapon, and part of my job is to stop those threats before they reach anyone. He paused and looked around the room. Students listened closely. No one was laughing now. I grew up in a small town, he said. I was told I'd never make it far. But I worked hard. I studied computers. I served in the military, trained, failed, trained again, and eventually earned my place at the Pentagon. I don't say that to impress you. I say that because some of you may feel like you'll never be believed either, especially if you come from a background people don't understand. Jaden's eyes were locked on his dad, filled with pride. Major Williams looked directly at Ms. Parker, then just for a second. I came today, he said, not to show off a uniform, but because my son Jaden told the truth. And sometimes, telling the truth takes more courage than any job title. Every student turned to look at Jaden. For the first time, no one laughed. Some looked guilty, others looked surprised. One or two even looked impressed. Major Williams wrapped up. I hope today you all learned something new, not just about jobs, but about listening, about respecting each other's words. Because what someone says, no matter where they're from, what they look like, or what you think you know about them, deserves to be heard. The room exploded in applause. Even the parents clapped loudly. Jaden didn't expect it, but he felt his throat tighten. He tried not to cry. Ms. Parker stood up, her face pale but composed. Thank you, Major Williams. That was powerful, she said, clearly struggling for words. Afterward, students crowded around Jaden's dad. Some asked questions. Do you really work with spies? Is the Pentagon like in the movies? What kind of computers do you use? Major Williams answered kindly, giving brief, clear answers. He didn't brag. He just treated each question with respect. That respect showed everyone something Jaden had been trying to say all along, not with words, but with character. One by one, students came to Jaden. Hey man, your dad's awesome. Sorry about what I said before. You were telling the truth, huh? That's crazy cool. Jaden didn't say much. He nodded, smiled a little. But inside, it felt like someone had just opened a window and let fresh air into a stuffy room. All the days of pain, of being mocked, of sitting alone, it felt like they were finally floating away. At the end of career day, Ms. Parker asked Jaden's dad to wait a moment while the students left. Major Williams, she said, I want to apologize. I realize now I dismissed your son. I shouldn't have done that. Jaden stood beside his father. Major Williams looked at her. Thank you for saying that, he replied. But remember, kids don't just need teachers to grade their homework. They need teachers to believe them. Ms. Parker nodded, clearly moved. As Jaden and his dad walked out of the school, parents and students watched them go. Jaden walked a little taller, shoulders back, head high. His dad gave him a proud smile and whispered, Told you. Presence speaks louder than any words. Jaden didn't reply right away, just smiled. That day would stay with him forever. Not just because his dad proved him right, but because in a world that didn't always believe kids like him, he finally felt seen. When Major Williams finished his talk and stepped back from the front of the classroom, the room was completely silent. Not silent like before when people didn't believe Jaden, but a different kind of silence, the kind that comes when people are thinking deeply, when they are surprised, even a little shocked. The students looked around at each other. Some of them had their mouths slightly open. Others were blinking like they were just waking up from a dream. Jaden sat quietly at his desk, but inside his heart was beating fast, this time not from fear, but from pride. He had dreamed of this moment for days. He had imagined the moment when people would finally know the truth. But now that it was happening, it felt bigger, deeper, more powerful than anything he had imagined. For the first time, everyone in the room really saw him. Major Williams calmly walked over and sat next to Jaden. He put his hand on Jaden's shoulder and gave him a small nod. Jaden looked up at his father and smiled. It was a quiet moment, but it meant everything. Ms. Parker stood at the front of the class trying to find her words. She had been the one who laughed when Jaden told the truth. She had been the one who joked in front of the whole class, not knowing what harm she had caused. Now, standing only a few feet away from a real Pentagon officer, her face turned pale. She cleared her throat and said, Thank you again, Major Williams. That was truly inspiring. Major Williams simply nodded and smiled. Thank you for having me. As the parents began leaving and students returned to their desks, the room slowly began to fill with whispers again. But these weren't the same whispers from before. This time they weren't laughing. They were talking with wide eyes. Did you see all the medals on his uniform? He works at the actual Pentagon? I thought Jaden was lying. He wasn't lying at all. Jaden could hear them, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The truth had already spoken for itself. During the lunch break, things changed. Jaden went to the cafeteria expecting to sit alone like usual. But as he walked with his tray, Elijah, his friend who had stopped talking to him, waved him over. Yo. Jaden, Elijah said. Sit here. Jaden paused for a second, unsure, but then walked over. He sat down across from Elijah and looked at him. I'm sorry, man, Elijah said quietly, looking embarrassed. I should have believed you. I didn't mean to act like you were lying. I didn't think anyone's dad could work in a place like that. I was wrong, Jaden shrugged. It's okay. No, it's not, Elijah said. But your dad, dude, he's awesome. He answered everyone's questions like it was no big deal. Jaden finally smiled. Yeah, he's like that at home too. Soon other students joined their table. Can you ask your dad how to make a password nobody can hack? One boy asked, Does your dad know the president? Another girl asked. Jaden laughed a little. He says he's met people who work for the president, but he mostly works on stopping hackers. The mood had changed completely. Jaden wasn't the weird kid anymore. He wasn't the boy who made up stories. He was the boy who told the truth, and now everyone respected him for it. But not everything was forgotten. After lunch, when the students returned to class, Ms. Parker looked more serious than usual. She stood in front of the whiteboard, holding a marker in her hand, but she didn't start the lesson right away. I want to take a moment before we begin, she said, looking around the classroom. I owe someone in this room an apology. The class went quiet again. I laughed at a student when he was telling the truth. I made a joke when I should have listened. I'm supposed to teach all of you not just facts and math and reading, but also how to respect each other. I failed at that. She turned toward Jaden. Jaden, I'm truly sorry. What I did was wrong. I hope you can forgive me. The room stayed silent for a few seconds. Then all eyes turned to Jaden. He wasn't sure what to say. It was strange hearing his teacher apologize in front of everyone. He knew it took courage. For her to say those words? He looked at her and simply nodded. It's okay, he said softly. Ms. Parker looked relieved. Thank you. That moment touched the whole classroom. It was rare to see a teacher admit they were wrong. It showed the students something powerful, that adults could also make mistakes and learn from them. And that saying sorry doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong. For the rest of the day, Jaden felt lighter. He could focus in class. He could laugh again without feeling like he was being watched. And every now and then, a student would give him a smile or a quiet hey in the hallway. Later that afternoon, the principal called Jaden to the office. He walked there slowly, wondering what it was about. When he arrived, the principal greeted him with a kind smile. Jaden, I just wanted to say thank you, she said. Your father's visit made a big impact today, and the way you handled everything with grace. We're proud of you. Jaden didn't know what to say. He just smiled and said, thanks. On the way back to class, he felt taller. Not in height, but in confidence. He had faced the hardest days of his life and stood strong. He didn't need to shout or fight. He just told the truth, waited, and let the truth speak for itself. That evening, when Jaden got home, his mom was waiting. By the door, I heard someone had a good day, she said, hugging him tightly. Jaden nodded. Dad was amazing. His mom smiled. He always is. They all sat together for dinner. This time, the table was filled with laughter. Jaden told them about how his classmates asked questions, how Elijah apologized, how even Ms. Parker said sorry. Major Williams smiled but didn't act surprised. People change when they're given the truth in a way they can't ignore. Jaden asked, Dad, do you think this will last, or will they go back to how they were? His father thought for a moment. Change takes time, not everyone. Change is right away, but you planted something today, son. Seed. Some of them will carry that lesson with them for the rest of their lives, and the rest, well, even they'll remember it whether they say it out loud or not. Jaden leaned back in his chair, feeling proud. That night he looked out of his window before going to bed. The stars were out, clear and quiet. He thought about how small he had felt just a week ago, how the laughter in the classroom had made him feel invisible. And now, the same people who laughed were listening, respecting, learning. He knew the world wasn't perfect. There would still be people who judged too quickly. There would still be voices that doubted him. But now he also knew something else. When the truth is strong-handed, you carry it with dignity. It doesn't matter how loud the lies are. The truth always walks in, calmly and clearly, and changes the room. The Monday after career day felt completely different for Jaden. School building, which had once felt cold and unwelcoming, now seemed to smile at him. The hallways didn't feel as long, and the walk to his classroom didn't feel as heavy. Jaden stepped through the front doors holding his backpack, wearing the same red shirt he wore on Friday, not because he had no other clothes, but because he was proud of that day. That red shirt now felt like his armor, a quiet reminder of what had happened and how far he had come. As he passed students in the hallway, some nodded at him, others smiled. A few even called out his name, Jaden. Yo, Jaden, your dad is so cool. Tell your dad thanks again for coming. Each word felt like a small piece of the wall around him was being taken down. For weeks he had felt isolated, like everyone had made up their mind about him before even knowing him. But now, the silence was being replaced with understanding and respect. When Jaden entered his classroom, he was surprised to see a poster on the board. It read, "Career Day Reflections, What Did You Learn?" Around it were sticky notes written by different students. Some said things like, "Not every job looks the same. People can surprise you. Don't judge someone by how they look or where they come from." Jaden's dad is a hero. Jaden stared at the notes, his heart full. He didn't know who wrote what, but it didn't matter. For the first time, his classmates had seen him not as a joke, not as a liar, but as someone worth listening to. That mattered more than he could ever explain. Miss Parker smiled at him when he sat down. "Good morning, Jaden," she said kindly. "Thank you again for sharing your dad with us. He inspired all of us, including me." Jaden nodded politely. He still remembered how she laughed that first day. He hadn't forgotten. But something in her voice now was different, softer, real, like maybe she truly understood the weight of her mistake that day. The class worked on writing essays about what they wanted to be when they grew up. Jaden wrote about wanting to work in cybersecurity, just like his dad. But more than that, he wrote about wanting to protect people, not just from hackers, but from lies, from unfair treatment, from being ignored. He wrote that the world didn't need more voices shouting over each other. It needed people who could listen, stand tall, quietly do the right thing. When Ms. Parker read his essay later that afternoon, she didn't say anything right away. She just placed a hand on Jaden's shoulder and said, This is beautiful." As the week went on, things continued to change. Elijah and Jaden started hanging out again during recess, kicking a soccer ball across the grass like nothing had ever gone wrong. Other kids asked to join in. Jaden said yes to everyone. One afternoon, during gym class, a boy named Carlos came up to Jaden while they were doing stretches. "Hey," Carlos said, "I used to think you were making stuff up." "I'm sorry." Jaden looked at him. Carlos was one of the kids who had laughed the hardest that first day. "It's okay," Jaden said. "A lot of people thought that." Carlos looked embarrassed. "Yeah, but I didn't have to laugh like..." "I did. That was mean." Jaden gave a small smile. "It's over now," Carlos smiled back. "Your dad's like, right, a real-life movie character?" Jaden laughed. "He's just my dad." But in his heart, he knew his dad was more than that. He wasn't just a man in a uniform. He was the reason Jaden found his courage. He was the example that showed him how to stand tall, even when no one believed in him. The next week, the school newsletter came out. On the front page was a photo from Career Day. Jaden's dad stood tall in his uniform, speaking to the class. The headline read, "Learning from Our Heroes, a Day to Remember." Below, it was a short article written by Ms. Parker. She explained how important it was to listen to every student and to never assume someone's story isn't real, just because it surprises us. Jaden read the article 3 times. Not because he needed to, but because every sentence felt like a part of his journey being told to the whole school. The boy who was once doubted was now the center of a lesson that everyone was learning. One afternoon, Jaden's mom picked him up from school. As they walked home, she noticed his smile. "Someone looks happy," she said. Jaden nodded. "It's been a good week." His mom ruffled his hair. "Your dad's proud of you, you know." "I'm proud of him," Jaden said quietly. When they got home, Major Williams was already there, sitting at the kitchen table, reading the newsletter with a proud grin. "You're famous now," he joked. Jaden laughed and sat next to him. "You should have seen their faces when you walked in," his dad chuckled. "But sometimes showing up is the strongest thing you can do." Jaden looked at him for a moment. "Did anyone ever laugh at you when you were a kid?" His dad nodded, plenty of times. The people didn't think I could become anything special, but I didn't need to prove it to them with words. I just lived my life the best I could, and eventually they saw it. Jaden leaned back in his chair and looked out the window. I think they see me now, he said. His father nodded. And, more importantly, you see yourself. Jaden didn't say anything else, but inside he knew his father was right. Weeks passed. Seasons began to change. But one thing stayed the same: Jaden's confidence. He was no longer afraid to speak up in class. He raised his hand more. He made new friends, even helped a younger student who was being teased in the hallway. Jaden stood up and said, "Hey, don't do that. Everyone deserves to be heard." The bullies walked away, confused. But the younger kid looked up at Jaden like he was a superhero. Jaden smiled. Not because he wanted attention, but because he knew what it felt like to stand alone. And now that he had found his voice, he was going to use it to lift others. Up to near the end of the school year, the school held a small awards ceremony. Ms. Parker stood at the podium, giving out certificates for reading, science, and math. Then she paused and said, "This year, we have a special award for a student who showed great courage, honesty, and leadership. Someone who reminded us how powerful truth can be." She looked directly at Jaden. "Jaden Williams, please come forward." The room burst into applause. Jaden walked to the front slowly, trying not to smile too wide. Ms. Parker handed him a small plaque. It read, "Student of Courage for reminding us that truth deserves to be heard." Jaden stood there for a moment, looking at the plaque. Then he looked at the audience. He saw his mom, smiling with tears in her eyes. His dad, standing straight in the back, nodded once, proudly. And in that moment, Jaden understood something important. People might forget what he said. They might forget what he wore. But they would never forget how he made them feel. How he reminded them that believing in someone can change everything. And most of all, he'd never forget how it felt. When the truth finally walked into the room and stood tall for all to see,